VinController.eu. Check vehicle history for every used car in Europe. Welcome to another Boostmania International video. It's Monday, 8 AM, and we're at Jab Garage. It's located on the outskirts of Bratislava. And today, we'll start working on the Corolla. Today is the first day of that whole process, so the engine and transmission will be taken out. We'll measure the compression of the engine. Of course, they'll drain all liquids before taking the engine out. We'll see if we have enough time today to see some engine innards. But regardless of whether it happens today, the whole engine needs to be checked over. We can already hear the timing chain clanking, and there are other weird sounds. But other than that, the car actually drives pretty nicely. I've had this car borrowed this summer, while my other car was getting serviced. But everything worked, even the AC. It's almost incredible. This is a 2003 car, so it's almost 20 years old, and it's done 300,000 kilometers. On top of that, it's the car that everybody drives like they stole it, since it is the sport version, and it still works. It doesn't seem like it needs any major work. So, what are we going to do with the chassis? Well, somehow we have to transport it to the body shop. The car has some dings and scratches that need to be repaired. Then we have to go over the car to make sure there's no hidden rust. And after that, the car will get new paint. They have to sand the paint down, paint it, and shine it. And there's a small problem. We still don't have a body shop we trust 100%. If you know of one in our area, please let us know. We've been trying to figure it out for some time now. Just any serious body shop, preferably in the central and west Slovakia, so that we have some chance of getting the car there. We'd appreciate any tips, because you see what the car looks like. I sincerely hope there won't be much hidden rust, but the top layer of the paint is completely gone. I think this is going to be our biggest challenge. The mechanical bits don't worry me. The chassis does. That's going to be a lot of work. Let's wake Zdeno up and let's get to work. So today we're pulling this Corolla's engine. So we start by measuring the compression, which can approximate the engine's health. So now I'll remove the coils and spark plugs and measure the compression cylinder after cylinder. We've removed the air filter as well. And this is very important when you're measuring naturally aspirated engines. You have to make sure the throttle body is open. The filter can be a hindrance to the airflow as well, so we remove it to get more accurate data. So now I'm setting up the compression tester. We always test compression from the side of the engine, which has the timing gear. We do that to easily identify which cylinder we're measuring. Now please listen and do as I say. Put the gas pedal to the floor, and you're going to try to start the car, just like normal. And keep starting until I say stop. Alright? This one's alright. I measured 15 bar on the first cylinder. Alright, let's try the second one. Alright. I like it very much so far. Let's do the third. And what was the result of the second one? The second one was 15 bar as well. Okay. The third one is 15.5 bar. And let's do the last one. You're good. Okay, so what are the results? So we have 15 on the first one, 14.5 on the second one, 15.75 on the third one, and 15 on the last one. I'm actually kind of surprised. This engine still has some very solid compression. Okay, so what exactly does it mean for you when you're servicing the car? Well, this tells us that there shouldn't be any problems with the valve seats or piston rings. Even though this engine has done some serious mileage, it still holds compression. So I've just saved €1,000. We'll find that out once we take the engine apart. But this is always a very, very good sign before the disassembly. Now that we have the compression tested, we can start disassembling the engine bit by bit. First we'll drain all the fluids from the engine and transmission, along with the coolant from the cooling system. Then we can continue with the electronics. If this was a regular customer's car, I would protect the paint with a special kind of fabric. But this car will get painted anyway. And I forgot to mention, before taking the engine out, you also need to depressurize the AC lines. We have a special machine for that. So right now, we can start taking the cooling medium out of the system. And while we're waiting for this to depressurize, I can start unplugging other hoses and electronics. The time it takes to depressurize the system varies based on the volume of the system, but usually it takes from 15 minutes to 40 minutes. I'll start it in manual mode for now, and we can start depressurizing. Yes, I've already checked the connections, both the high and low pressure, so we can start. I'm seeing some signs of home mechanic work. The clips that should hold the plastic panels have been replaced by some hideous screws. All of them have different lengths, threads and washers. And I think I've just pricked my finger. You've got to be careful around the throttle cable. I've put my gloves down and I forgot about it. There's always a lot of sharp objects in the engine bay, so you have to keep that in mind while working. And I believe we found our first problem. The throttle cable is glued to the throttle body by rust. And the throttle cable is actually destroyed. It's only holding on 3 fibers out of 5. I think this tells you a lot about longevity of Toyota engines. Now I know everything looks pretty alright under the bonnet, but if we take this vacuum line for example, which looks pretty nice, but when you try to press it, you can see the rubber is all in cracks. So it means it can leak under high vacuum. The vacuum usually isn't that strong, but it can certainly create some problems for you. So that's why we'll replace it. Yeah, I'll have to check every single line now. Everything has to be looked over, so that the car is in good condition and safe. So far we've taken around 380 grams out of the AC lines, and the car should have around 490 plus minus 30, which tells us most of the cooling medium was still there. I'm guessing the AC system is not leaking then. Now I have removed the glove box, so that I can disconnect the engine's wiring harness. I'll disconnect one plug here, instead of disconnecting all the plugs under the bonnet. We'll take the engine harness off once the engine is out of the car. I can see its head. There we go. And it's out. At this point, the electronics should be mostly disconnected. We're disconnected from the interior and the ECU. We've also disconnected most of the grounding points. So let's see if we can find some more of them. But going by memory, we have around 95% of the electronics disconnected. So we can continue then. Oh, and by the way, we got a question from one of our fans. How did you figure out that a brake piston is seized just by looking at it? It's actually pretty simple. If you look at this face of the brake rotor, you can see that the full area of the brake pad makes contact. But on the inside face, which you can nicely see from under the car, you can clearly see that the rotor only has wear on the top side. Based on that, it's pretty obvious that the piston is seized and the caliper doesn't return to its place. But one thing is really surprising about this car. Despite the age and mileage, it still has all the underbody plastic panels. And they're not even cracked or destroyed. That's really rare. The electronics are fully disconnected. The shifting linkages have been disconnected as well. So now we're about to drain all the liquids, so that we can take out the radiator and the rest of the engine after that. Beautiful. There it is. Now I'll drain the transmission fluid from the drain plug. The transmission fluid is very specific. It almost always looks really clean when coming out. But there's not so many places where the oil can get contaminated, like in the engine. But even though the oil can look really nice, it can still lack the properties it needs to have. I can see somebody fought this nut before. It's pretty obvious. They should have replaced it for a new one, because the part that's supposed to hold it in place is no longer there. So what's your solution? We'll take it off for now, and then we'll put a new one on when the car gets assembled. Now I am loosening the ball joints, so that we can remove the control arms. Thankfully on this car, the ball joints are held in by screws. If they were pressed in, we would fight them a bit more. The right axle is split into two parts, so it's connected to the mid-axle. This one's going to fight us a bit more than the left one. Now that we've successfully removed the axles, and we'll loosen the rear one as well. So the front engine mount is out, and this one has been through some stuff. We have a rusty bolt on the headers right now, and it doesn't want to get loose at all, so we have to cut it off. Thankfully, we have a sawzall on our hands, so let's hope we can access it and cut it really easily. And this is the bolt we just took out. Now we're draining the coolant, and it's time to remove the radiator. It's nicely rusty on the mounting points. We have to take it out to make some space for the engine. The bottom hoses have been disconnected, now we'll disconnect the top ones. We'll also disconnect the AC lines from the compressor, and we can take the engine out. I can't wait. It pops pretty nicely. I have to be very careful with every single screw here, so that I don't snap it. The radiator seems to have been replaced recently. It's in pretty good condition. And you can see it on both of the faces. Now I'll disconnect the clutch slave cylinder and the shifter linkages. That's because they are directly connected to the transmission, and that's going out with the engine. The other side of the clutch hydraulic line is connected to the chassis, so that stays in the car. And the same goes for shifter linkages. It's going to be fun if the hood is in the way. Alright, that's good. A bit more. There we go. You can slowly start turning the steering wheel. Exactly like that. Well, I'm standing where the engine usually is. Sometimes here's the trunk, but mostly the engine. Today it took us 3.5 hours to take the engine and transmission out of the car. The next thing we have to do is choose the paint color. We'll have to decide on the final paint coat for the car, and we might even let you guys vote. So please, tell us in the comments. Do you want to keep this color, or do you want a different one?